If you're building AI applications with large language models, you're paying for every single token, both input and output. But here's the problem. Most developers have absolutely no visibility into their token usage. They're essentially running their applications blindfolded, and the bill that comes at the end of the month is a terrifying surprise. In this tutorial, we'll solve this problem by creating a complete monitoring solution using Spring Boot, Spring AI, Prometheus, and Grafana. You'll get real-time visibility into exactly how many tokens each API call is using, response times across different types of requests, error rates and potential API failures, and projected costs based on your current usage patterns. All right, so before we jump into some code, I wanted to take a look at this little diagram that I put together because I think, at least for me, when it comes to observability, there are a lot of tools out there that do different things, and I always get kind of confused by those. So I want to start here with, like, what are the different tools involved in creating these dashboards, if you will. So first off, we start with Spring in the Spring Boot Actuator. You need to include the actuator dependency when you go to like start.spring.io because this adds monitoring capabilities to your Spring application. It does so by exposing health metrics and application information as HTTP endpoints. It helps provide data about memory usage, thread counts, HTTP requests in the case of AI token requests. And then also allows you to check if your application's up and functioning properly. So that is Spring side of things. Include the Spring Boot Actuator as a dependency. Next is Prometheus. What does that do? It collects and stores metrics from your application as time series data. And this is important. It needs to store it in this format so that we can kind of view it later on. So it scrapes the metrics exposed by the Spring Boot Actuator at some type of regular interval. It stores this time series data efficiently. It provides a query language that you can analyze these metrics. So you can go into the Prometheus dashboard and kind of query this data. And then it includes some alerting capabilities. So we've exposed this data via the Spring Boot Actuator. We're collecting this data via Prometheus. And then Grafana comes in and allows us to visualize the metrics stored in Prometheus through dashboards. So the key features here are you can create customizable dashboards with graphs, charts, alerts, etc. You can connect to that Prometheus as a data source. It supports annotations and templating for dynamic dashboards and provides alerting based on metrics thresholds. Now you can go in and create these dashboards however you want once you have the metrics collected. I'm going to provide you with a dashboard that you can use as kind of a starting point. With Grafana, you can go in and really just design your own dashboards and then kind of export that JSON if you wanted to use it somewhere else. So I'm going to kind of do that for you. So those are the three key players. How does this kind of work together? So again, we have a user request to our Spring application. The Spring Boot application, your code runs and processes the request. So in the case that we're going to build today, it's an AI application. We have a REST controller that will take in a prompt, and we will send that off to the LLM and get a response. So Spring is handling that. The actuator collects internal metrics about your application's performance and sends them off to Prometheus. Well, Prometheus really scrapes that data, right? So it scrapes the metrics from the actuator's endpoint, and we'll see what data is in that endpoint when we get into our app. And then it stores them. Once it's stored, Grafana is using Prometheus as a data source, and it is powering these dashboards. This gives you complete visibility into your application's performance and health over time. And this is going to be so that we are no longer blindsided. We are no longer blindfolded with our application in production. We know exactly what's going on. So I have a repository here, github.com/Dan Vega, Spring AI metrics. If you want to go ahead and take a look at this, this is everything you need to get up and running. You will need Docker Desktop to run this unless you want to go off and install Prometheus on your own, install Grafana on your own. Then you can kind of do that, and you should be able to get rid of the Docker Compose stuff. But Docker Desktop, and what that is going to allow us to do is you're going to be able to copy in these files here in the Docker folder. And this is going to give us those dashboards. So you don't need to go in and create this dashboard by hand, which can get pretty tedious and time consuming. So this, when it starts up, uses Docker Compose, uses these JSON files and YAML files for configuration to basically start all of this up for you and create it. You don't need to do that. So I would go ahead and clone this application instead of starting from scratch, but I'm going to start from scratch so you can see it. So where do I start? I start at start.spring.io. I'm going to kind of fill in some information here, dev.dan Vega. We'll call this metrics. And all I need here is a couple of things. I'm building a web application. I'm building an AI application. In this case, we're going to talk to OpenAI. I need that Spring Boot Actuator, so I'm going to include that. And finally, I'm going to include Prometheus. So we are going to include Prometheus and then the Docker Compose support. So I'll go ahead and include the Docker Compose support. And let's go back here. I just want to make sure I am not missing anything. Yeah, we will need to, okay, so Actuator, Web, AI, Docker Compose, Prometheus. Yes, and then Grafana, I don't have a dependency on and not using that in the Spring application. That is just something else that we will use in the Docker Compose file. So with that, I think we have everything we need. We can go ahead and click generate. That is going to download a zip file. You can open it up in whatever text editor or IDE you're most proficient in. For me, that's going to be IntelliJ. And with that, I think we have what we need. Let's write some code. All right, so we are going to open up the compose.yaml. Again, if you're following along, that's fine. Don't kind of type this all out. You can grab this from the repository. We're going to talk through this. So we have a couple of services in here. One is Prometheus, one is Grafana. So Prometheus, we're grabbing from this particular image. We're calling the container image Prometheus. The volume is going to be /docker/Prometheus. Now, again, I'm going to copy in those files from the repository so that we can see them. So there they are. So Docker/Prometheus. And this just says, hey, this is the job name. We're going to scrape the metrics from /actuator/Prometheus. And we'll need to configure that in a second. And we'll come back to that. And then that runs on port 9090. So if we want to get to that, localhost 9090. Then we have Grafana, has a container name of Grafana, runs on port 3000. Then we have some volumes here, one of which is going to be Grafana provisioning, and one of which is going to be Grafana dashboards. So if we look in Docker, we have provisioning and we have dashboards here. So under provisioning, we have some data sources for Prometheus. Again, this just sets this up as a data source. And then we have this dashboards, and that's the dashboard that we have. And then this is the actual code for the dashboard. Again, you can go into Grafana and create this dashboard by yourself, and then basically export this JSON if you wanted to be able to reuse that again. But essentially, that's what we've done here. We have the code to create the dashboard, and it uses all the specific metrics that we need. So like here's a GenAI client operation in seconds. You can kind of look through here to see what those look like. So with those in place, we're getting there. We need to do a few things. We need to go ahead and set some properties up. So first off, anytime that we are going to talk to a large language model, we'll need to do some configuration there. So I'll say spring.ai.api key is, and I have an environment variable for this called OpenAI API key. And then we need to set the model. So in this case, I'll say the model is going to be GPT-4o. And then we're going to set some configuration on the actuator side. So we've included the actuator, but we haven't said what endpoints we're going to kind of expose, right? So we'll say management dot endpoints endpoint dot web dot exposure dot include. So what do we want to include? I want to include info, health, and then this new one for Prometheus, so we can see what's going on there. And also Prometheus needs that endpoint to go ahead and scrape that data. So with that, I'm going to say management dot Prometheus dot metrics dot export enabled is true. That is the default, but I'm just kind of being explicit here so we can see that. And then I'm going to just kind of pull out a couple of more configurations. Again, this is from essential settings for good data collections. This one's important in development because if you don't set the sampling probability to 1.0, then you're not collecting every single request. You wouldn't do this in production because you're not collecting data for every single request. That would kind of bog the system down. But for development, this is pretty important because we want to test all this stuff out locally. So make sure you set that. And again, all these truths are saying most of these should be enabled, but we're just kind of setting that up. Okay, so we have our Docker configuration. We have Grafana and Prometheus config ready to go, and we have our properties for our application. So now what I want to do is just create a simple kind of chat controller. So I'm going to go into, let's close this up, source main Java, and this should not be in there. This should be in here. And I want to create a new Java class. We're going to call this chat controller. This is going to be a REST controller. We are going to need the chat client. So we get that through the chat client builder interface. And then I'm going to just create a simple Git mapping. So this will be at /API. Actually, let's set this up here. Request mapping. And we'll say /API/chat. And then this is just going to return a string. So we're going to use that chat client. We are going to say prompt. The user message is going to be whatever we get passed in here. So let's say this is a request param. We'll call this a string. We'll call this our prompt. And then this will be our prompt. And then we can go ahead and make the call and return just the string content. So that should be good. And now we have everything we need. We have a controller that we can hit. We have what we need in Docker to go ahead and run this application. So when it starts up, we get Prometheus running, we get a Grafana running, we get all of the metrics being collected. We have the actuator endpoints that we need enabled. So we're looking good, I think. This will be the true test though. Let's go ahead and see if we can't run this application. Oops, I did not want to debug that. Let's wait till this runs and I'll stop that. Oh, we have something going wrong anyway. So maybe debugging is a good thing. Yeah, so that's probably expected. Let me go ahead and open up my Docker, pull this on another machine, on another screen here. And I think that this is just because I had a similar one running before when I was testing this. So let's just go ahead and create or stop those. Okay, so now let's go ahead and just try and run this application, Dan. And we see Docker pulling. So now it's pulling both Grafana and Prometheus. And it's going to pull those down. Now, the first time you do this, if you don't have these containers available, then it will take a few seconds. But once you do this second time with those containers in place, you should be starting up pretty quickly. So you see we have Tomcat started on 8080. So let's go ahead and head over to the browser and take a look at a couple things. So the first thing I'm going to look at is the actuator endpoint Prometheus. You can see that we are exposing a lot of data here. Some of these are in the form of HTTP server requests. But do we have anything in here? So JVM stuff. So nothing's going on there. So off screen, I'm going to go ahead and send a prompt. That was a previous one. Let's go to API chat. Come on, Dan. Prompt equals tell me a funny dad joke about dogs. All right. And if that goes through, we should see a response. Cool. I love that joke, by the way. But now let's go over to Prometheus and refresh this. And now we see some endpoints in here or some metrics being collected for like Gen AI client. And so we see that we are talking to the model GPT-4o. Prometheus is doing its job and collecting metrics about the things we care about in our application. So now we can go over to 9090 if you wanted to. So if you wanted to take a look at Prometheus, you can get some insight into what's going on with what data is stored there. If you're not sure what query is, you can show the view. You can kind of jump in here and explore your metrics. So if I wanted to see Gen AI client, let's see if there's, a token. So I want to do this one. Cool. Let's insert that. And then we can kind of see what's going on there. And then these are the metrics that are being collected around the Gen AI client token usage. So we have our actuator, we have Prometheus. That leaves us with Grafana. So I'm going to open up Grafana. And by default, you will want to log in with admin. Close. Skip. I don't need to reset that password. So if you go into dashboards, you now have a Spring AI metrics dashboard. Again, that was configured in the Docker configuration. If you go to your connections and you see data sources, you'll see that Prometheus is being used as a data source. So now we can go over to our dashboards, click on here. Let's say last 5 minutes, refresh that. And again, I'll go off screen here. I'll go and see if I can send a few more of these. Tell me a funny joke about cats. As you can see, we have some data coming in. So let's go ahead and send a couple more requests. I want to get a little bit more data. So let's have it write a couple of larger responses. Write a simple, oh yeah, that's a good one. And then I think I have another one. So this will take a second. And again, we're looking for a longer response time here. We're looking for more tokens from the LLM so that we can see this kind of in the dashboard here. I probably should have not went this way, but how about write a simple Spring Boot app that uses a REST API and provides CRUD operations. All right. And let's just see if this goes through. Great. So that's a little bit more data. So we should start to see some more data when that fourth one comes in. But now, as we see here, we have token usage. So we have prompt tokens, completion tokens. These are input. These are completions. So the inputs are going to be a little bit less. But now we can see the completion tokens. That first one, that dog joke was like 42. And then we have 352. And then this last one was 18, or what is that? I'm sorry, 1604. So then we see the response times. So again, this is coming back from the large language model. So in the case of the last one, I would know that like, hey, that was a large response. I probably shouldn't be sending you that as a blocking call. We can use the streaming support in Spring AI to kind of stream back that response to the user. Then we see total tokens used, so both the input and the output. So 72, 409, and then 18 something, right? We also can see errors. We can see system resources. And then we see the total requests, average response, success, and error rate. Now, again, this is a dashboard that we just created and exported the JSON so that you could quickly get something up and running. You can go in here into dashboards and create your own dashboard. So you could say new dashboard. You can use add visualizations. You can import one. You can import a panel. There are dashboards out there in the community that you can go ahead and use. You can add some visualizations. Again, you're just connecting to the data source that is already there, which is that Prometheus endpoint, which has all of the time series data available that we scraped from the Spring Boot Actuator endpoint. All right, so that's all I really wanted to show off today. Not a ton of code. There is some code in like the Docker configuration for setting this up, but again, you can pull that from the repository and then hit that endpoint over and over, maybe even write a script to do it a little bit more locally so you can kind of see what those visualizations look like. And now you're no longer blindfolded. You can put something into production and start monitoring it. Make sure that you're not getting slammed, or if you are, make sure we are controlling the amount of tokens that are getting sent to a large language model, and start putting some of those guardrails around that instead of just, again, being blindfolded and waking up to a very expensive bill at the end of the month. So, hey, friends, I hope you learned something new today. If you did, do me a favor, leave me a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and as always, happy coding.